Pleasant good morning, one and all. At this time, I would like to officially call this session to order. I do crave your indulgence as I'm fighting something that I'm not sure what it is. Honorable Frederick Stevenson, Minister of National Mobilization, Social Development and Youth. Permanent Secretary, Ms. Narissa Gittins Macmillan. Ms. Michelle Forbes, Director of NEMO. Ms. Lafleur Kwame, Coordinator Gender. Ms. Maria Contro, UNDRR Representative. Other senior officers of NEMO and the Ministry of National Mobilization. The media participants, a pleasant good morning once again. Today we are here for serious business. The Gender Affairs Division within the Ministry of National Mobilization, in collaboration with NEMO and the United Nations Office for Disaster Risk Reduction, is hosting this consultation and training workshop to look at the whole issue of gender and vulnerable groups in early warning systems. Disaster does not only affect men, it affects us all. And if you should pay attention to what is currently happening, in particular in the Bahamas, would recognize that the vulnerable are mostly women and girls, and also children. The intention of today's workshop is to engage in dialogue amongst different actors working together with gender, early warning systems, and to increase the knowledge of gender and early warning systems at the national level. It's also to fill in the gender and vulnerable groups in the early warning systems. It would also allow us to further define how gender, age, and vulnerable groups, their status affects 4 pillars of the early warning systems in St. Vincent and the Grenadines and within the Caribbean, and to pre-identify what is required in order to fill in these gaps at the national and regional levels. So it is our intention to have you do the work that you know how to do, but we're going to do it in a smarter way. And as such, you are here today. Today we have persons representing government organizations. Tomorrow would be non-governmental organizations. And so, as you can understand, it's a lot of work, but we'll get it done. Without further ado, I would now like to invite to do some opening remarks for us, Ms. Michelle Forbes, the Director of NEMO. Ms. Forbes.
Honorable Frederick Stevenson, Minister of National Mobilization, Social Development, Family, Gender Affairs, Persons with Disabilities, and Youth. Mrs. Narissa Gittins Macmillan, Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of National Mobilization. Ms. Maria Contro, Disaster Risk Reduction Advisor for the Caribbean from the United Nations Office for Disaster Risk Reduction. Ms. Lafleur Kwame, Coordinator of Gender Affairs. Specially invited participants from gender and vulnerable groups, representatives from the various ministries and departments with interest in early warning systems, members of the media, a pleasant good morning. A pleasant good morning.
Good morning.
Okay, that's much better. It gives me great pleasure to welcome you to this first ever national consultation on gender and vulnerable groups in early warning systems. When I told someone last evening of the topic, they found it strange, wondering how does gender fit in. But we have long recognized in the area of disaster risk reduction that disaster affects the most vulnerable, be it women, elderly men, youths, children, or differently abled persons, and that all of our work must be able to address this population, especially so in the area of early warning systems, as persons interpret warnings differently. And thus, when a warning is given or when programs are developed, it is with the intention that every section of our population understands the warning and, most importantly, can take appropriate action to save lives and property. This consultation builds on the efforts that have undertaken by NEMO in the last 2 years with our local partners, namely the Central Water and Sewage Authority, the Meteorological Services, and the St. Vincent and the Grenadines Red Cross, with support from regional agencies such as the Caribbean Disaster Emergency Management Agency and UNDP Barbados and the OECS. We have had several workshops and national consultations to address the wide area of early warning systems, with an emphasis on gender and vulnerable groups. We have also developed a roadmap what St. Vincent and the Grenadines have been doing in early warning systems, what are our gaps, and where we need to be in the short, medium, and long term, incorporating gender and vulnerable populations throughout the 4 pillars of an end-to-end early warning system. It is not only for the NEMOs or the Met offices in the region and nationally to take vulnerable groups into our decision-making for various hazards and warnings, but it is for you also to work with us and be able to adapt or better able to interpret the messages for your specific population long before warning is given. As I end, I want to thank all for coming to this consultation, and I look forward to the discussions as we ensure that all sections of the population are included in our disaster reduction programs here in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Forbes. And as you could recognize, we are moving speedily along because we have work to do. So let's talk, more action, right? Right? So at this time, we would break protocol a bit. We will have the overview done after. So we're going to bring the minister forward to bring his remarks. So we now invite Honorable Frederick Stevenson to make a presentation to us. Honorable Minister.
Let me take this opportunity to extend a very warm welcome to all of you who are attending the first ever Gender and Early Warning Systems workshop here in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. This workshop is organized by the National Emergency Management Organization, NEMO, and the Gender Affairs Division in the Ministry of National Mobilization, Social Development, Gender, the Family, Persons with Disabilities, and Youth. We have partnered with the United Nations Office for Disaster Risk Reduction, UNDRR, to engage with all stakeholders to address the needs of different vulnerable populations and gender in disaster risk reduction, in particular, early warning systems. As the Minister with responsibility for gender affairs, I am pleased that gender, which has been identified as a cross-cutting theme in NEMO's comprehensive disaster management strategy and program, is not just visible on paper in these various policies, but that a concerted effort is being made to include and to hear from those who are not only often marginalized during emergencies, but are also the most severely affected following the impacts of a disaster. I want to applaud the Gender Affairs Division for agreeing to partner with NEMO and the UNDRR in this training and consultation, and to ensure that the voice of our women, boys, girls, differently abled and vulnerable populations are included in the development of early warning systems, protocol, public information, and overall programs. The Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction 2015-2030 refers to an early warning system as a critical element for disaster risk reduction. In fact, one of the 7 global targets call for a substantial increase of multi-hazard early warning systems, which are an important element to implement the Sendai Framework. Furthermore, the development, the maintenance, sustainability, and strengthening of early warning systems is part of the Comprehensive Disaster Management Strategy and Programming Framework 2014-2024, championed by the Caribbean Disaster Emergency Management Agency, CDEMA, and adopted here in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Early warning systems are also well recognized as a critical life-saving disaster risk reduction tool, and it is internationally recommended that effective end-to-end early warning systems reflect the following components. 1, risk knowledge. 2, monitoring and warning services. 3, dissemination and communication, and 4, response capability. It is against this backdrop that NEMO, with the support of the United Nations Development Programme, applied the early warning checklist here in St. Vincent and the Grenadines in March of 2018. This checklist was completed by several key agencies, community and social groups, and the findings were then validated through a national workshop, which was held in May of the same year. Throughout the application, it was found that persons of varying gender and vulnerable groups, especially women, elderly, and the mental and physically challenged, were often left out of the decision-making process in developing early warning system programs. What was clear, though, is that normal modes of communication and dissemination of information does not always reach the most vulnerable and hence does not always translate into action. I want to therefore ask, how can we then tailor our national early warning system program, especially in the area of public education, to meet the needs of the hearing impaired, the vision impaired, the elderly, women, children, the youth, and the mental and physically challenged? Some of these findings have shown, for example, that when a woman receives information on early warning on a pending hazard or emergency, she is quicker to notify her immediate family, friends, and her neighbors, and prepare them for such an impending threat. But the men may not always do the same. I'm talking to some men here. So at this workshop, over the next day and a half, I want you to consider gender and vulnerable groups as a cross-cutting theme that must be embedded throughout all aspects of disaster risk reduction, of which early warning systems is a key component. I want to thank NEMO for leading this effort nationally through all of your consultations in 2018 in ensuring gender is addressed in all components of early warning systems. And I understand that you are now moving towards adopting national early warning protocols through the support of the Caribbean Development Bank under the Disaster Management Project in the Ministry of Transport and Works. What we discuss here at the national level will also feed into the regional framework for the development of early warning protocols. And I want to encourage all present to ensure all of our interests are articulated as we aim to have gender and vulnerable populations included in the early warning systems that is developed with gender and vulnerable populations considerations included in the development of an end-to-end early warning system. I cannot end by saying that we have seen Hurricane Dorian. Some of us here in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, when the warnings were given, we slighted the possibility of the storm. As you know, we have a belief that no storm or hurricane will ever come here because we are safe, we are a safe place. But later on, we saw the impact that Hurricane Dorian had on the Bahamas and some other countries in our region. It is important for us as a people to understand that we have to appreciate what NEMO does, what the Met offices in St. Vincent and the Grenadines also do, and what, when all is said and done, when a warning is given, that all of us in St. Vincent and the Grenadines must be prepared for any eventuality. I remember in 2004, Hurricane Ivan was heading to our parts. And then without a warning, it devastated our sister island of Grenada. They too were saying that God is always with them and no storm would ever affect them. So I want to say today, and I'm sure that NBC and SVG TV and the API would reiterate this point, that is important for all of us in St. Vincent and the Grenadines to take seriously the warnings given when an impending storm, depression, or whatever is approaching our country. May you have a productive and successful workshop. Thank you very much, and may God continue to bless us.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister. Now we get into the deep parts of our meeting and consultation. We now have the overview and context for why we are here, which will be presented by Ms. Maria Control, the UNDRR representative here with us this morning. Ms. Control.
Honorable Minister, Mr. Frederick Stephenson, Permanent Secretary, Mrs. Nerissa Gittens Macmillan, Ms. Michelle Forbes, Director of the NEMO, Ms. Lafleur Kwame, Coordinator of the Gender Division, dear members of the offices and NGOs working with early warning systems or gender matters. I would like to give you a brief introduction to the topic and the agenda of today. My name is Maria Contra. I'm a disaster risk reduction advisor for the Caribbean region at the UNDRR. Mentioning briefly what is disaster risk reduction. Disaster risk reduction is a central part of sustainable development, as decades of progress or development may be lost in few minutes due to an occurrence of natural or man-made hazards. That is why it is very important to work with disaster risk reduction and at the same time recognize that $1 invested in disaster risk reduction and prevention can save anywhere up to $15 in post-disaster recovery. Early warning systems are an essential part of functional disaster risk reduction. The United Nations Office for Disaster Risk Reduction convenes partners and coordinates activities to create safer, more resilient communities to protect lives and livelihoods. The UNDRR is a focal point of the United Nations system for disaster risk reduction and the custodian of the Sendai framework for disaster risk reduction. The objectives of UNDRR include the prevention of new and reduction of existing disaster risk, strengthening resilience through successful multi-hazard disaster risk management. And as I mentioned, the Sendai framework for disaster risk reduction, it is a global roadmap for reducing human and economic loss as a direct result of disasters, and it also recognizes the importance of gender and vulnerable groups in this process. And as mentioned by the minister, the Sendai framework has 7 global targets. First, it emphasizes on reducing the mortality, affected people, economical loss, and damage to critical infrastructure and disruption of basic services. So those are the first 4 global targets of the Sendai framework to reduce these aspects. It also aims to increase the number of countries with national and local disaster risk reduction strategies by 2020 and increase the international cooperation and increase the availability and access to multi-hazard early warning systems and disaster risk information and assessments. And the last one will be the focus of our workshop today and tomorrow. In the agenda today, first we will have a theoretical part of the gender and vulnerable groups in early warning systems. We will, in the session 1, we will look at the early warning systems. Then at the session 2, we will look at the why gender and vulnerable group considerations are so important in early warning systems, also in increasing the results of early warning systems. And in session 3, we will see the current situation of gender and vulnerable groups in early warning systems in the region and at the national level. In the afternoon, we will do a group work, and tomorrow we will present the process of the regional early warning system strategy development, followed by a consultation, the first consultation for the early warning system strategy, and those results will then feed the development of the strategy. This is part of the Cruise Caribbean project, and Cruise as climate risk and early warning system is a global initiative to support the small island developing states with impact-based, multi-hazard, gender-informed early warnings to protect lives, livelihoods, and assets. Part of the global cruise initiative, there is the Cruise Caribbean project, which has 3 different objectives. The first one that the consultation is focused on is the development of a regional strategy for early warning and hydromet services. The second component is institutional strengthening throughout the whole region, and the third one is implemented in the 3rd and final year of the project that will be piloting the results of the first and second components. The gender and vulnerable groups are recognized as cross-cutting themes for the Cruise Caribbean project, and the integration of gender aspects and other vulnerable groups are recognized as essential in all aspects of the project, but specifically for the development of the regional early warning system strategy. The context of the early warning system is specifically important here at the Caribbean, as it is one of the most disaster-prone regions in the world. The hazards in St. Vincent and the Grenadines include several hydromet risks such as hurricanes or floods, and also some seismic matters and some other interconnected hazards. The livelihood structure is also something we need to take into consideration, because there are livelihood structures that are vulnerable to disasters. Then we want to look about the process from survival to sustainability, how the early warning systems are designed and how the reactions focus on the sustainability rather than only to survival, as hazards are frequent phenomena in the region. It is important that we focus on the sustainability aspect. And some challenges in the region may include geographical aspects, such as limited places to escape in some islands, accessibility, and for these, it is very essential to prepare on time in order to save lives. It is also important in the Caribbean region to unify efforts, and there are regional organizations working for this matter in cooperation with the national organizations. And in this context, we need to reach the ones most at risk, and in order to reach the whole population and increase the results of early warning systems. During this workshop, we consider several early warning system concepts, such as impact-based forecasting, people-centered early warning system, and end-to-end early warning systems. This can enable the region for risk-informed decision-making in all sectors. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So this brings us to the official end of the opening part of the ceremony. Consultation. On behalf of the ministry, we want to say thank you very much for turning out this morning. Without you, this consultation would not be possible. So the collaboration between NEMO and the Ministry of National Mobilization continues to bear fruit, and we are hoping that once we are finished here, it will not turn out to be another talk shop, but we will go and become active. We are already in an active season, so therefore let's activate and mobilize. Thank you very much, and have a fruitful